Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Colin Kingsmill. Colin, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Very good to have you. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Oh, yeah, sure, of course. So I do a few things. I'm the co-founder of a company called Whole Human Coaching, and in that business, we work with teams and leaders on creating really cultural cohesion in a very complex time, as you know, for work. With Colin Kingsmill Coaching, I work with founders and CEOs on really helping them perform better and be better top leaders. And I also have a consulting company called Insight Incorporated, where I help people on their branding, sales, marketing, and communications. It's all really the same stuff, though, just helping people get to where they need to go. So it's all the same thing. Lots of big fancy names for doing one thing, basically.
For helping
But
people,
that's it.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Of all the things that I could ask you about, what's your what are you most passionate about?
I am most passionate about my purpose or mission in life, if you like, and that is to help people rediscover their humanity, to work and live in integrity, to become fearless, and if you can do all that, to become free. And really free, I mean, from psychological suffering or anything that's holding you down. Um, yeah, that's really my mantra. That's what I work on doing every day. So humanity, integrity, fearlessness, and freedom. That's it for me.
Well, those are some interesting topics. And one in
Yeah.
particular that's very popular on the internet is the topic of fear. Um,
Yep.
what do you think about the conversation around the topic of fear that typically goes on in the internet? What are your thoughts when you
Well,
view
look,
those opinions?
first of all, I'm glad that they're happening, right? Because for so long, especially for guys, for or males in your audience, for so long we never we never discussed these things, right? It was sort of brushed under the carpet, and I think it's really important to have a dialogue. And no matter how wide the lens is on that dialogue, I think it's good that it's happening, right? Because if you are living in a fearful state, that has all sort of waterfall effects in terms of depression or anxiety or boundary issues or trigger issues, or there's a whole sort of cornucopia of challenges for us that arrive from that essential nugget of fear, right? And and I think it's good that there's the conversation is going on. Um, Not easy to overcome. I think, it's pretty easy for a lot of uh, a lot of people on social media or on TikTok to sort of parse out quick solutions, right? Like just but that's the era that we're living in. But as long as you recognize that you need to dig deeper and drill deeper and go farther, and that it's a bit of a process, right, to remain fearless. And it's not just the nugget that you're going to get from 15 seconds on TikTok. But good, I'm glad it's happening. It should be, you know. Um, we live in a really complex time where fear is often served up to, keep people engaged, to keep people on social media, to keep people watching the news, to keep people in a divisive state, right? So um, it's important that we have those conversations, because I think it's so paralyzing to so many people.
Okay, positive take. I like it. In terms of a working definition, or
Mm.
if not a working definition, then what's the word actually mean to you? Fear.
Fear means being bounded and held down by stories and narratives that are in your head. Um, so so that's why part of my sort of process of humanity and integrity, of fearlessness and freedom, is to unleash those shackles, if you like, right? because it's a debilitating state of mind or state of play to be in, right? When you are fearful of anything, it clouds your choices, it clouds your decisions. It's like looking through your glasses that are opaque, right? You're if you're living through a lens of fear, you're not seeing properly, you're not seeing straight, you're not seeing whatever's in front of you with clarity. To me, it's a little bit like a ball and chain, that just being held back, held down, depressed. I don't mean depressed as in the clinical way, but just pushed down by the weight of fear. And it immobilizes a lot of people, right? To make the right choices, to make the choices they know they need to make, and they don't make them. And then they begin to internalize the guilt. And, so it's a very destructive state of mind, emotion, place to be. And I don't think we realize how destructive it is and how impactful it can be on your life, right? Because if you're fearful of, what people might think, or fearful about expressing your true identity, or are fearful about expressing your dreams or your wishes or your desires or anything, a business plan, that ultimately is not good for the body. And people like Gabor Mate and there's lots of others now speaking about these things. Those emotions stay in the body, and it's never good. It's never good. It results in dis-ease ultimately, or certainly dissatisfaction, and at a minimum.
You mentioned anxiety. My
Yeah.
question is around, do you make a distinction between the two, or are we just describing the same thing with two different words?
I think anxiety is an acute form of fear, is the expression of kind of the pinnacle of that fearful place. So you can be sitting at home and have a sort of a baseline tension of fear, right? When the stories start to swirl around in your head about all of the negative possibilities, and it gets worse and worse and worse, so much so that you might have a panic attack, right? For me, it's just the pointy end of the spike, if you want, or the sword. But to get there, there's a journey. So I wouldn't call them the same thing necessarily. I think anxiety is a byproduct, one of the byproducts of baseline fear.
Okay, so
If that makes
fear
sense. I
would
don't know. What do you
be,
think?
yeah, yeah, fear would be milder than anxiety.
Yeah, yeah, because anxiety often it can be really debilitating, right? And it can stop you in your tracks. It can keep you at home. It can keep you from socializing. It can there's it can cause panic attacks. So to me, anxiety is like fear dialed up to 10. Okay, where it gets to the point of debilitating, right? Debilitating your physical actions. Baseline fear is, oh, I can't say this because she's going to say that, or I can't do this because they'll think that, or I can't make this choice because I feel financially insecure. So I think they are quite distinct. I mean, living in fear still allows you to get through the day. That being said, it's in a sort of a contrived, boxed in way, but you can still function, right? Whereas
Hmm.
anxiety, depending on the level that you're at, can be very acute and totally just stop you.
And do you have any thoughts around uh, the difference between a fear that is valid, like danger, versus a fear which is imagined?
Sure, sure. So there's, again, it's like the scale, right? So there's a point at the very sort of essential biological level where, fight or flight is important, right? And it's part of our evolutionary biology, and we should know when to run. We should know when there's a danger. We should follow our intuition. If you are in a dangerous position or a situation, that's biological, evolutionary, and very important, right? So there's the biology of fear and understanding when dangers need to be averted, and then there's the buildup from that, right, to fears that are beliefs and stories and narratives that you're telling yourself, or that you have incorporated into your daily life, and then it gets worse and worse up to that point of anxiety, right? And there's all kinds of sort of emotions in the way, but the fear instinct with fight or flight is essential, and it's good, right? So you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that you can never be afraid, right? You should be in certain instances, right? For sure.
Well, it leads us me nicely into kind of like a segue, if you like, which is
Sure.
we you've gone over perhaps what the negative example of what this looks like. Perhaps you wouldn't use those words, but what is an
Mm.
example of someone who is dealing with it in a positive way? Let's say they have a fear, and what does that example look like for people?
Well, look, I think you can see it. I think you can see it everywhere where people have said, all right, I'm going to do it, where there's been sort of this fearful buildup, and it might be anything from as sort of trivial as bungee jumping or jumping out of an airplane or doing extreme sports or whatever. But it also, you also see it when people finally do make a decision, especially from a career perspective, right? To go, hold on, I've been afraid of this decision for the longest time, and they make it, and it's like this sort of release from prison, if you almost, as a metaphor, right? Like you burst out of that fearful place into the new you, and there's lots of examples around like that. So one of them would be a great resource that I always quote is Martha Beck and her book called The Way of Integrity. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but she was a Harvard professor. She was married. She had family. She was tenured. She ticked all the boxes in terms of success and lifestyle and all that. But it wasn't for her. She was not happy. She was not who she really was, and she left all of that behind, right? And has actually written the book. I just said it, The Way of Integrity, and that's an example of living in a fearful place, recognizing it and saying, I can't do this anymore. And then unleashing those chains of fear and creating the new Martha Beck. And now she's flourishing as an international best-selling author and as an executive coach. And she's married. She's got a new partner now. So everything changed. I think there's lots and lots of examples like that of people that have said, I won't say it here, but they said enough of the fearful place and the way of being and the way of living and the way of working. I'm going to make a change, and they come out on the other side better off, healthier, happier, fulfilled, purpose driven.
Thank you for the example. The three steps that you broke down from noticing that you're doing it,
Yep.
making a decision, and then changing your behavior.
Yep.
I kind of feel like people know what the first step and the third step would look like, but it's the second
Sure.
step that they follow with, that they
Yep.
struggle with, rather.
Yep.
Um, have you got any thoughts about how to speed that up? Because I would
Sure.
imagine it's the length that is the problem there. People can spend
Hmm.
years over something that perhaps your expertise might help them speed up.
Hmm. Hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I just mentioned kind of three phases if you want, but you have to break down each of those phases into smaller pieces for sure. So first of all, the identification of the stories and the headspace is really important, right? So so recognize it is one. Inventory it is the second element that I think people have to do. So write down all of the stories that you're telling yourself, all of the self-limiting beliefs, all of the stuff that you nonchalantly say, oh, I can't do this, or I can't done that, or I've done this before. Those are all judgment calls on yourself. Okay. So recognize it, do an inventory of all the stories that you're telling yourself. And what you want to do in that phase is in that initial phase as well is once you've done the inventory and it's got to be physical, like you've got to write it down, okay, or document it on a video or some way, but it can't just all stay in your head. Document it, right? Once you've done an inventory of your self-limiting beliefs or the fearful beliefs or the judgments or whatever you're saying to yourself, you then look at each one of those and decide, is that true? Is it serving me today? If it's not, where did it come from? And go and forgive that person or that time and that place that created that idea, okay, or that story, because that's all it is, right? Once you've done that, okay, you can then begin in the second phase to begin to think of the new you, like the new story, right? The new stories that you're going to tell in your head that are less fearful, that are fearless, okay? But to do that, I kind of have a few steps, right? It's not just one, stop being fearful. It's the first thing
It's not a TikTok video.
It's not a TikTok video. It takes a little bit, but it's the first thing is stop absorbing negativity. Okay. And by that, I mean, turn down social media, turn off the news. If you want to get informed, but don't watch the news. Okay. Because again, that's a product that generates and promotes fear to keep you engaged. Anyway, that's a whole other story, right? But stop absorbing negativity, turn off the news, get informed about things that are important to you. So read the journals, read the science, read the books, read the history, get informed, right? And in that process, begin to create what I call a personal protection system. It's almost like your own personal kryptonite, right? You've got to remove all the sort of toxicity around you, right? So family members or family or television or media or gaming or whatever it is that is introducing the ingredients for a cocktail of fear. Okay, so protect yourself, right? The second point is to listen to yourself and listen to your body, because and that goes back to that first phase of documenting this, because so often we go through the day, right? And we have, I don't know, 70,000 thoughts a day. I don't know what the number is exactly, but you have thousands and thousands of thoughts a day, right? You've got to listen to those and deconstruct them and dissect them and see if they really are real and that they're serving you. And also listen to your body, right? So often we find ourselves in these situations where we'll have a gut instinct, right? You'll be at a business lunch or you'll be in a team meeting or you'll be speaking to your boss or your wife or whoever, and you get these pings in your body or your stomach. Those are signals, right? The body is a loudspeaker. And in our modern culture, we don't listen to it, okay? So in this second phase, protect yourself, listen to yourself. Once you start listening to yourself, you can then begin to design the new you that is fearless. What I mean by that is truly designing the picture of the life that you want to be living. Okay. And there's a plethora of tools out there, right? You can listen to Mel Robbins' podcast that, it's twice a week, and she's got all sorts of ideas on goal setting and not ideas, but incredible resources on resetting your life. There's all sorts of ways to do it. There's vision boarding, there's journaling. There's 1,000 ways of designing the life that you want, but you've got to, in that process, you've got to be the architect. Okay. You've got to be the architect, the captain of your boat, because if you don't know where you're navigating, right? If you don't have a milestone marker planted out in the future, you're going to just drift, right? And then drift, and then fear comes in and the waves get bigger. The story, right? The milestone marker or the goals that you've got, they've all got to be broken down. So often you look at a motivational poster in an office and you put, the house that you want, or the car that you want, or the life that you want up on the fridge, and you kind of forget about it, right? But you've got to break it down into achievable goals so that you're not just looking at a pipe dream, that you're looking at something that you're creating, if that makes sense. You've got to have daily rituals to stay on track. Again, because of the society that we live in, at least here in the West, that personal protection system is really, really important, right? But it can be eroded so easily because of this sort of insidious hyper novel broadcasting world that we live in today. So the introduction of daily rituals, I mean, start meditating, start mindfulness, start doing yoga, start doing journaling. There's got to be something to make sure that that personal protection system isn't eroded. You've got those daily rituals in place. There's one last step, or maybe it's two last steps, but you've got to forget about what others think and forget about what you've learned. Forget about everything you've learned, essentially. Now, what I don't mean forget about everything you learned in school, and but I do mean forget about everything you learned that's not serving you anymore. And that goes back to that inventory, right? As you're doing this inventory of beliefs and self-limiting beliefs and judgments on yourself. Also look at what are the practices, what are the habits, what are the things that are no longer serving you, that are from the past, and forget about them. So forget about what people think and forget about what you've learned that's not serving you, and take what's serving you into the next chapter. So that would kind of be that phase 2, if you want, of overcoming fear. And I forget what the last phase was, but that's your new life, right? That's the new you.
The last phase
The
is
next,
making the decision, right?
yeah. I mean, that's kind of every day almost, right? Making the decision to remain in that fearless place, and I think if you can kind of do those steps and make sure it's a recurring process, you don't just do it once and think, oh, I'm never going to live in fear again. It's a habit.
Well, that's a fantastic answer, and I really appreciate you breaking it
Sorry, too
down.
long.
No,
Way too
no,
long, I'm sure.
it was perfect. One follow-up, if I may, and
Sure,
it's
of
about
course.
the you mentioned in your answer about what it is that's perhaps making you fearful, and you gave the example of devices and news and that sort of thing. I
Yeah.
think that some people are unaware of what's influencing their mental state. So if you were to list off a bunch of stuff, or at least the common things around what is actually making them fearful without them knowing, what would be on that
Hmm.
list?
I mean, one of the top ones would be alcohol. Alcohol has a huge impact on fear, right? On sort of more paranoia, if you like, but it is a huge contributor to a fearful existence. The other one is nutrition, right? So if you are not getting the proper nutrients and you're not feeding your microbiome properly, it can go off and it can completely alter your state of mental health. Off kilter microbiome, which they're calling the third brain, right? It it can send you plummeting into depression and anxiety very, very quickly. So, for example, if you take a round or two of antibiotics and you've had an infection, that's okay, you can take the antibiotics, and you don't replenish your microbiome, right? Very quickly you may get into a depressive state or a fearful state or a state of anxiety. So really pay attention not only to the externality around you, right, with whatever you're consuming in terms of news or social media or friends and family and community, making sure that that is not toxic, but also what you are ingesting and the impact that that has on your state of mental health and on fear. So I would really pay attention to those 3 things: external, alcohol, food consumption, microbiome. Yeah, that would probably be it.
Nutrition is a pretty tricky one because it's not about not doing something unless you're referring to like processed junk food or something. But it's like, are you getting certain things? So, do you have any thoughts about if someone is not quite sure whether they have the right nutrition, what would they do?
There's the more expensive option of actually testing your microbiome and testing all of the what is going on in your body with platforms like Viome, right? That will give you a very, very detailed analysis of what is in your body and what is in your microbiome and what's functioning and what's not, and what you need to change in terms of your diet. But I forget the cost on that, but the free way of doing it would be to read the ingredients on what you're eating, right? And unfortunately, in the world that we live in today, and there are great resources out there, like Kaylee Means, the whistleblower from Coca-Cola, or Brian from Food.Lies. I mean, there's thousands of them out there today saying, wait, guys, we are living in a world where so much of our food is hyper processed, and you don't even think about it. Like, think about bread. Okay. So next time you go to the store and you pick up a loaf of bread, read the ingredients because, often the third ingredient will be sugar, right? And, or go and pick up a package of roast beef and read the ingredients, and you'd be surprised that beef might be only 15% of what is in that package, right? The rest is artificial fillers and soy and all this other stuff. So you don't have to spend money to be attentive to what is going inside your body. And that would be my recommendation. If you can afford it, look into something like Viome. If you can't, start to read the ingredients and start to understand how so much of what's out there in our world today is designed for addiction, right? So whether it's social media, whether it's alcohol, whether it's sugar, whether it's processed foods with high levels of carbohydrates. I don't want to turn into a nutritionist on this channel, but there's a massive correlation between what you're eating and your mental health. There's no doubt.
So it would be an emphasis on adding more base ingredients and less of ingredients you can't pronounce.
Back to basics. Exactly. So read the labels. You'll be shocked.
In terms of making the change, any thoughts about I would say it's probably difficult because you walk into a supermarket, the majority of the products are going to be processed. I think there's a few aisles where they don't have that, but
Yeah.
any thoughts about implementing, not necessarily specific to nutrition, but good habits?
My one piece of advice would really be kind and gentle to yourself, right? And don't try and make a monumental shift, right, all at once, because that's never very helpful, or very successful. But start to make small incremental changes. If you want to live without fear, begin with that design of the new you. What do you want the new you to look like? What does the fearless you look like, right? Start to design that picture, start to journal it, start to articulate it, and articulate it in great detail. How do you want to live? Where do you want to live? What do you want to eat? What do you want to surround you? Like, really paint a full picture of the tapestry of your life, and make incremental small changes on a daily basis, right? Just these things of like New Year's resolution, I'm going to change everything, they never work, right? So life is too freaking hard to do all that at once. But if you look at those three phases that you and I spoke about at the beginning, recognizing it and inventorying it and then breaking it down and then deciding to make the change, that take a year to do that. Do it slowly. Do it. I'm not a big proponent of quick and simple and easy, and that's just the fast food of mental health and coaching, and doesn't work.
Mm. Change takes time.
Change takes time. And I think it's worth recognizing the challenging times we live in, right? I mean, I know you live in the UK and I'm in Canada, and like, my God, the stuff that's going on is complex, right? And so don't be too hard on yourself.
I think that the three phases that you put forth are excellent, and I think for the most part, if people were actually to implement them, then they would see a big difference in their lives. Have you got any thoughts about perhaps common failures? So someone who tries to do it, perhaps they're not doing it in the right way, or it hasn't worked for them for some reason because they're not doing
Hmm.
X. Anything that
Hmm.
comes to mind for you
Hmm.
there?
Sure. If you didn't feel like it worked the first time, right? This transition or this change into fearlessness, you've got to go back and look at that inventory of stories that you're telling yourself, because so often what happens is people will, if you can visualize a vat or a tank full of gasoline or oil, people will be looking at the very top layer with maybe positivity, right? Oh, everything's great. I'm happy. I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah. Like happy, 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 positive, listening to affirmations and the right podcasts and the right meditations and stuff like that. List law of attraction and abundance, everything, right? Oh, I got it going on. But underneath that, you are probably still telling yourself those stories you were telling yourself in the past. Okay. So my advice would be go back and look at that inventory. Go back and look at the self-limiting beliefs, because if it's not working for you, it means you still need to deconstruct those beliefs and narratives in your head and the stories in your head. There has to be some tension there still, because that the superficial layer on top of that seems fine and dandy, but underneath it you're telling yourself still the old stories. So that's typically why it fails, right?
There's actually one of the things I was going to clarify with you, and I think you're answering one of my questions, which is
Mm,
it's situational. So,
yep.
right now I feel great. I feel like I can do anything. But as I get closer and closer to that thing that I'm scared about, I get more and more
Mm,
fearful. And is this
mm,
the answer to that question?
yeah, yeah, sure, because you're beneath that sort of visceral emotional fear that you can feel in your body and your mind. There must be some kind of narrative or story or belief, or there's something still there. It's like a wound that hasn't been properly cleaned. That's kind of a gross analogy, isn't it? Sorry, but but you know what I mean. It's like you've got to dig out all of those demons and stories and beliefs and figure out where they came from, and if they're not serving you, you've got to go back and forgive that child or that young adult where that idea or that belief came from. And we carry so much with us, right, throughout life, that we see life through these opaque lenses, right? So I'm just saying, make sure you all those lens or curtains or whatever you want to call it, make sure they're gone so you can see clearly. And you're right, fear has this tendency to come back and to swell up, without you even really noticing it much, because you still have some of those stories on that need to be addressed,
And if
deconstructed.
someone does have uh, if they have a particularly difficult time with a fear or something they're afraid of, you'd help them through that doing this
Hmm.
process. Is that right?
Yeah, you really want to. I mean, the process is almost sort of laser precision storytelling, right? Or story finding, right? So I keep asking, where's that coming from? Where is that coming from? What is the origin of this belief? And it's amazing, Thomas. Like sometimes the origin story of a belief in a mature adult is from, when they were 9 years old and there was a divorce in the family and they felt that they had to compensate, or when they're 10 and maybe the family was slightly dysfunctional at the time, as they all are, and the eldest child thought that they had to, take control of everything. Well, now they're 30 and they're doing that same thing in the office, right? So it's really interesting when we go and kind of do a bit of Sherlock Holmes into the origin of each of those beliefs, because they all have an origin story. Okay. So the work to do is to go and find the origin story. And often when an adult finds the origin story, it's kind of like this huge relief. That's like, oh, that's where it came from, right? It's like, well, I don't need that anymore. That's what I mean by it's not serving me. I'm not in a family relationship that's dysfunctional and I'm 10 years old, or I'm 9 and parents got divorced. That's over. Okay. And I don't want to go into therapy with you about it, but we can go back in time. We can recognize it, acknowledge it, forgive it, and move forward. And that's what I mean by removing those lenses, because the lens of me having to be a 10-year-old and having to fix the family, that's one. My 9 years old and there's a divorce and I have to, it's my fault and I have to compensate for everything and I have to, be a people pleaser. Oh, that's another lens. So you begin to we cloud our lives through these lenses and these stories, and many of them create fear and engage fear and keep it lit and keep it going. So my work is, all right, let's deconstruct those. Let's it's like investigative journalism. Maybe that's a better
Mm.
analogy than surgery.
Well, it's a great process, and I appreciate you sharing it. Have you
Hey,
got any
yeah.
favorite examples that you are proud of where you've helped someone through a fear like this?
Yeah, I've got lots of them. I mean, that one example that I just gave you of somebody who found herself sort of taking control of everything in the office, right? Having to, and it wasn't her role, right? She was a sort of a junior in actually in the UK, and and she's like, why am I doing this? Like it's destructive, and it's like not good for me. It's not good for my colleagues. It's creating tension, and so we went back and we figured out where she needed this desire to take control of everything. And it was that example from when she was 10 and the family was slightly dysfunctional, and now they're all fine, but as a child you see maybe your parents fighting or some tension or whatever, and family stuff, and you think, oh, I have to take control, right? I'm the eldest. I have to take control. I have to manage my siblings and sort of manage my parents, and I see that all the time. That sort of I should call it yeah, origin story deconstruction, I guess, is the medical term that I just made up. I have to write that
Well,
down.
thank you for
Yeah.
that. Is there anything I should have asked you about today?
No, I don't think so. I thought we had fun. I think we're good for today. If you have any
And
questions, I can always come back.
if people want to connect with you or hire you, where do they go?
I guess just colinkingsmill.com or wholehumancoaching.com. I'm also on Instagram. So yeah, I'm easily findable. I seem to get found every day on LinkedIn by all sorts of people that want to sell me something more. So
Who doesn't?
um yeah, right. Exactly. Increase your whatever. Anyway, yeah, that's where to find me.
And do you have any closing thoughts for us today?
I don't. Well, maybe I do. The one closing thought would be, if you are in a place of suffering, right, or in a fearful place, just know that it does not have to be like this. There's hope and there's a way out. It's not your story to live in fear. We have a right to not live in fear. That's it.
It's a great one to end on. And
Thank you.
thank you for being a great guest today, Colin.
Hey, Thomas, thanks a lot. It was good to be here. Thank you very much.